Welcome to Ancient Wisdom, Modern Science, the podcast where timeless traditions meet cutting-edge discovery. I'm Michelle Hammond, and together we'll explore how ancient practices that have stood the test of time combine with the wonders of modern medicine and evolving technologies. Each episode brings fresh insight into how this powerful meeting of past and present is reshaping health and healing, helping us better understand the body and mind connection, enhance well-being, and unlock human potential. In this episode, I'm joined by Amanda King, a naturopath and nutritionist specialising in integrative oncology and metabolic cancer care. Amanda combines modern diagnostics with hyper-personalised nutrition and lifestyle plans that support conventional treatment while enhancing vitality, emotional well-being, and health outcomes. This is a conversation about bridging science and soul and the extraordinary potential of truly patient-centred care. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by the wonderful Amanda King. Amanda, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
It's lovely to see you. Now, you have a wealth of experience and expertise that I want us to sort of delve into. So let's start with your kind of story, because you're a naturopath and you're a specialist in integrative metabolic health. Tell us a little bit about your backstory and what led you to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. Very briefly, all the way back, I wanted to study psychology and I pursued that path. And my first degree was in psychology and human biology. And I got very, very interested in nutrition in my early 20s. I read a book that changed my life. So that book was actually about raw fooding, which I don't now sort of sit with the same sort of paradigm, but it was a life-changing thing to turn my own health around. I had chronic disease myself. I had reflux and I was put on omeprazole, and I completely reversed the disease and I haven't had it since. And that was with diet and lifestyle. So I got to see for myself the absolute power, if that's the right word, of actually using nutrition and lifestyle to change health. And so fast forward a little bit, I had my children, and then I really, really wanted to study nutrition, and it was either going to be nutrition or psychotherapy, but I kind of always came back to this thing. Psychotherapy is excellent, no doubt about it. It's a bi-directional relationship, how you think and how your body behaves, if you like, from a biochemical point of view. You can affect both in a sort of one affects the other in both directions. But for me, it really always came down to nutrition. So I studied naturopathic nutrition with CNM. The College of Naturopathic Medicine in London, and then I took the postgrad to do the naturopathic diploma. I kind of just followed it all the way to the end, and interestingly enough, then you've mentioned the integrative metabolic health. At that point, when I became a naturopath, I was already working as a nutritionist, but I didn't specialize. In fact, somebody gave me the advice to generalize for a bit and see where, what I was attracting, what I enjoyed working with, what I seemed to be good at. And it generally seemed around gut health, which I've always been very interested in. And then I heard Patricia Peet and Naisha Winter speak at a conference, and that was my language. I knew that they were talking in my language. I could relate so much, and I just knew that was my direction. So I began training with Naisha Winters through metabolic regen, and completed that postgrad qualification at the end of last year. So since then, I've pretty much exclusively worked with cancer.
Amazing. And you mentioned two huge names there. So some of our audience will be very aware of sort of both of those names and the kind of influence they have on sort of health generally, but definitely in the integrative sort of oncology sort of field. So for those listening who kind of aren't familiar with the term metabolic health, and how it kind of helps and sort of heal and build resilience, tell us a little bit more about metabolic health from your understanding.
Sure. So with metabolic health, I mean, it's a very sort of general term, and you wouldn't really pinpoint it down to any one thing, but you
Mm.
would probably talk about mitochondria. So within the batteries, within our cells, we have a battery. It's like a battery powerhouse, sometimes we call it. And that is called the mitochondria. And our mitochondria produce energy for us. They do a lot of other things besides signaling as well, but generally speaking, we think of these batteries as kind of energy storers, energy producers, and we need to have a certain set of conditions for those to operate optimally. So that would include not just nutrition, but from a health perspective, a whole bunch of different lifestyle and environmental factors that would all contribute towards the health of that mitochondria. Where we have mitochondrial damage, we see cancer. So that's where and other chronic diseases. So we want to, if we're thinking about our metabolism, we want to make sure that we are producing energy optimally and that we're functioning well. So this might be things like movement and even stress management. Nutrition, of course, is your diet an inflammation producing diet, or is it, or driving inflammation, or is your diet anti-inflammatory, full of nourishment for your cells? Does it give you everything that you need? Is it supporting you, or is it dragging you down? Even the relationships you have with people around you, to what extent is that supporting or not? Meaning and purpose. I mean, these, it does seem to be a bit woolly almost, but in fact, all of these areas are very important, because if you get 9 out of 10, but you have one big rock in your backpack, so to speak, it's going to weigh you down. So metabolic health actually is looking at the entire terrain, looking at all of the environment, and how can we optimize that.
Beautiful. And actually, as a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner and psychologist myself, like, it goes back to that kind of ancient wisdom, doesn't it? That kind of, when we're talking about kind of our sense of purpose, our social connection, our time in nature, all of those things, as well as the kind of stuff people are more familiar with about diet and exercise and, what they're putting into their bodies or physically doing to their bodies. How does that approach differ or challenge the current conventional support for people with cancer?
Okay, so I suppose you would look at things from two perspectives, and you might put all different kinds of labels on those two perspectives.
Mm.
You could say that one could be reductionistic and then one could be integrative. So, a reductionistic paradigm in any discipline, psychology or nutrition, or anything, would reduce that individual down to the problem. So you've got a problem, you've scraped your knee, let's put a plaster on it. And an integrative paradigm might say, yeah, you've scraped your knee, but does it keep happening? Is it that we need to adjust something in your environment? Is it that when you do that activity, you keep falling in this way? Do we need to adjust something? Is it not healing well? Is the reason why the plaster doesn't, you keep having to put a plaster on the injury because you're not healing? Do you need more nutrition? Is there something preventing it? There's all sorts of different questions that might go around that, where we might then integrate lots of different aspects of healing to that one thing, rather than just saying, there you go, there's a painkiller and a plaster. I mean, that again, that's quite a sort of small basic example, but from a cancer perspective, we tend to reduce it down to, well, we basically operate within, in conventional medicine, within the somatic mutation theory. All of these are theories of cancer. And so that comes from the paradigm that all cancers are down to genetic mutations. And we know that some cancers do not have genetic mutations in them, and some genetic mutations that are known to cause cancer in that individual are not expressed as cancer. So there's a lot more going on, and that's where looking at a more integrative approach can be beneficial, because we start to say, well, what other drivers might there be? The same as the sticking plaster approach. What else could be causing it? How might we improve it if you do have that kind of an injury or express that kind of dis-ease? How might we improve your ability to heal from that? So as opposed to simply medicating.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with that in mind, because I know you've banged this drum for a while and you work with people on a sort of individual level and obviously share your expertise in sort of, podcasts and talks and things like this and a lot of writing. What are the biggest kind of misunderstandings you see around what you do in supporting those living with sort of and beyond cancer, either from a client's perspective or from the conventional medical practitioner's sort of perspective, the oncologists themselves?
Yeah, I would say that there are a lot of misunderstandings, and within the integrative oncology space, trying to break down some of those misunderstandings. One is that integrative metabolic oncology is an alternative to to conventional therapies. It's not. There is we don't conventional medicine will treat cancer. We don't treat cancer. This is not what we do. We support and treat the terrain, the environment, and so we act as a complement. We never act instead of. What our paradigm really is that the patient needs access to understanding the full range of evidence-based complementary therapies that are available to them, which often they're not informed about, and that there is a great amount of research, a huge amount of research for each individual therapy to show benefits in individuals who bring the whole thing together, integrating conventional with complementary. So that's one thing. This is not an instead of or a them and us approach.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. And it's never sat well. I have a quite a large family history of cancer, and it's always frustrated me. And even just the general narrative around health, particularly if I look at the UK, we talk a lot, don't we, about how, obesity, smoking, all of these things can increase our risk. And diet plays a part in helping us both manage our weight and also manage our terrain, manage the health of our sort of bodies and minds. And we do a lot of promotion around that. Yet when somebody gets ill, they're often told, "Oh yeah, don't worry about it. It's not it's not important. Eat what you like, do what you
Yeah.
like, let us take control of it." But that's really quite disempowering as well, isn't it?
I feel it is disempowering. It's interesting because this is something I've written about how actually information, education, being able to make decisions, informed decisions, of course. It's so important to have that empowerment. It's very closely linked to hope, and that, as you know, as well as a psychologist, your mindset shifts your physiology too. We can have huge impact whether a person has hope or meaning and purpose, or I mean, we could put it under the banner of positive mindset, but I think it goes deeper than that. I think actually knowing that there's something tangible that you can do, that you're not simply a passive recipient of whatever is being thrown at you. That's what it is. In a way, that is what makes us a human being. That's how we retain our sense of self, identity, humanity. It's so important, and it's associated with better outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so tell me a little bit about those outcomes and in your experience, what kind of changes you see? Because I know you offer quite a lot of different sort of tests and interventions, as well as obviously helping people interpret those results, which is obviously critically important. But I mean, just going on your website and reading some of the testimonials on there are extremely heartwarming, and you can feel the empowerment that people have got, both from getting the knowledge from you and having that sort of really personalized and prescriptive support. So tell us a little bit more about some of the key changes you often witness as a result of people kind of going down this route.
Yeah, sure. And I do want to start off by saying that there are no guarantees. Nobody should ever sit there and say, nobody should ever sit there and say, this is going to cure your condition, because this is not what it's about. We're dealing with, we understand human biology to some extent. There's a lot we don't know. We're discovering all the time, and we put the pieces together. And then there are these individual differences, which are absolutely complex and entirely complex. We have the history of that individual, the environment that they occupy. We have genetic SNPs. So you mentioned about diagnostics, and one of the things that I've worked with is nutrigenomics, which is actually it's to do with the epigenome. So it's to do with epigenetics, how your environment affects your genetic expression. So your genes are fixed, but there are these tiny changes, you could call them mutations, they're actually called polymorphisms. And these tiny changes affect potentially, let's say, how fast or slow a gene or an enzyme that it codes for would operate. And so let's say it's a slow metabolizer, then you might have whatever it's metabolizing. Let's say that's adrenaline. If you're a slow metabolizer of adrenaline, that means adrenaline's going to hang around a lot more for you as an individual. So you've got the same genes, but if we know that about you, then you might need some extra support with stress management, including maybe having something to help you speed the activity of that gene up, which would be just magnesium, for example. And that would then mean that that individual could clear adrenaline out more, which would have a positive impact on the overall outcomes. So in order to answer your question about outcomes, it's mixed. Everybody's different. So I've had some one recent result was absolutely wonderful. A couple actually, just amazing when people come up and say, you know, you've saved my life. It's been really wonderful to hear things like that. In fact, I haven't done anything. It's been all about them doing their work and following their protocol and really getting stuck into it. And I really, you know, I have nothing but admiration for all of the people who, you know, take their health into their own hands and become empowered to make those sorts of changes. Dale Atkinson has been very public about his journey on LinkedIn.
I saw his update yesterday, actually.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously, while I wouldn't talk about individual patients with Dale, it's a bit different because he's been so public. So Dale came to me last November, and he had been given a diagnosis of about 11 and a half months to go, and the chemotherapy might push that out a little bit, might keep him alive for a short while. He had a primary tumor in his esophagus and many METs, tumor breakoffs, which had begun to grow in different parts of his body. He has written extensively about this, but it was, you know, he was young, in his 30s with 2 young kids and a wife, and, you know, a full life to live. And so Dale worked with a number of practitioners, including myself, and for my part in that, we worked on his diet, some lifestyle interventions, some complementary therapies. And that was, you know, he had a whole team around him, which he did the right thing. He is the CEO of his cancer journey. Each individual should be that. And 3 months ago, we got the news that all of his METs, including one around his aorta, had gone, and his primary tumor was reduced by 30%. And then in his last scan, which he's just waiting for the results of in the next few days, like the official results, his primary tumor has gone, which means that there's no surgery, there's no there's no conventional medicine left available because there's nothing to use that on, which is incredible. And his story is a very powerful message, I think, about how complementary therapies can work. And they don't work for everybody, it has to be said. There's no magic bullet, there's no magic wand, but the outcomes that I see can be anything from stabilization, reduction of tumor size, reduction of METs. The really nice things that tend to happen quite quickly are that people with long-standing issues like indigestion, brain fog, skin issues, even mood issues, they tend to start to stabilize when they move into a ketogenic diet. And not to go off on too many tangents, but you probably know the work of Dr. Georgia Ede, who is doing great work in the psychotherapy, psychology space with ketogenic diets. And I also see people with improvements in mood and improvements in hormonal health in that as well.
Yeah, incredible. And thank you for sharing that. And you're right, Dale's story is absolutely inspiring. And it was just beautiful to read that update yesterday, and I think you're right. It gives people such hope, and it's such an inspired, empowering story
Yeah.
when he was given such a poor prognosis. But it's also quite devastating because it kind of just shows the gap. And I mean, Dale makes the point himself, doesn't he? You know, he was able to finance a lot of that himself, and it does seem to be very much a postcode lottery, and very much, you know, at the disposal of the individual of what they can actually sort of afford and pursue. And that definitely shouldn't be the case. It should be a case that everyone can have access to this knowledge and to personalized and prescriptive medicine, because actually surely that's the wonder. You know, people keep talking to me about the fears around tech and AI and all these advancements, and I'm like, but the upside of that is we can get even more personalized and even more prescriptive efficiently and cost effectively, and surely that's an absolute must.
I think so, it is. And I think that, there's no doubt that this is the future. And there is no doubt, you're right, there's a huge financial implication. Some of these tests are pushing 5 grand, that, and they are state of the art, the gold standard, but it's not within the reach of everybody. And excuse me, and that is one of the reasons why I do write about complementary therapies. At the moment, it's off-label drugs for cancer on Substack. So with my Substack, with my writing, I have a section. I always leave a good section for free subscribers and extra information behind the paywall, so that, and the majority of my subscribers are free and they stick around, and it's growing. And the work has been referenced by the Independent Medical Alliance in America twice. And yeah, that's really exciting too. I love their work. And so what it means is that, at least in that respect, there is freely available, referenced, I want to put big underline there, referenced information. This is not conjecture. You can go and you can go right through the links to the data, read it yourself, and see what the information shows us. And that is available to everybody. So that is under the Metabolic Nutritionist on Substack, and it's worth knowing.
Fabulous. And we'll explore Substack. That's a new area for me as well, Amanda. But you mentioned sort of some of the tests there, and I know you do a DNA methylation test, and there are others kind of that will direct people to the websites. They can have an explore of those. Can you just tell us a little bit about those, what that actually involves? And I know you do offer the gold standard of those sort of tests, but what does that actually mean?
Yeah, that's okay. So in terms of testing, the test itself is really non-invasive. So it's a simple cheek swab test. It's almost like a cotton bud. You run that around your mouth, you collect the cells from the cheek, and then you put it into the stabilizing capsule. It goes off to the lab. When I say gold standard, there's a couple of aspects to that. One is that the DNA sample is destroyed after 6 months. And I feel that in this world where we're almost kind of reaped for data in every direction, that actually, working with somebody who actually respects your privacy, and it's there for a point and then it's gone, I feel that that's a really important aspect.
Yeah.
And the other is the format in which the tests are offered. So I've done a lot of work with methylation DNA testing. I've worked for the company who offer the tests. Actually, for 3 months, they took me on as an independent contractor to read those tests to their practitioners for a short period of time, although I've been offering them for a lot longer than that. And also for another clinic, I read those tests back to back quite frequently, all day long at one point. And so the tests themselves are they're really useful because they help you to understand your tendencies. As we were saying before, there is a risk with DNA that we get reductionistic again, and the interpretation helps us to get beyond that. So you can just look at a DNA test yourself, and without an interpretation of the entire picture, you could say, oh my God, I'm a slow metabolizer of this. I need more of that. I have to have this. And it might actually just not be true, because that tendency with your DNA is always going to be your tendency, but it might not be what's actually happening in your life. So if, say, for example, you're a slow absorber of folate from green leafy vegetables, but your diet is very rich in green leafy vegetables, you don't eat grains with, you don't take folic acid. So in the UK, wheat is fortified with folic acid. If an individual goes down the high street and just buys a generic kind of multivitamin, it will have folic acid in. And for many individuals, that folic acid can actually block the uptake of proper folate. So it can actually use up all the enzyme and leave none left for proper folate. And it can actually get somebody in a state where they're folate deficient sometimes, which is obviously not the intention when you're taking a supplement to boost that. And so that individual might be doing all the right things, and they might, despite their SNP, have a very high, very optimal sufficiency in that nutrient. So it's actually understanding, it's having a conversation with that person, knowing what their lifestyle is like, and telling them in that respect that if they don't continue with their healthy lifestyle, if they find themselves in a position where they don't eat leafy greens, they're not having oily fish, they're having a lot of wheat, a lot of bread, they have a much faster tendency to become deficient in folate than somebody who doesn't have that.
Yeah.
That
Amazing. And I think that's really key, isn't it? Because I think there are more and more sort of tests on the market that people can do for very different sort of providers. And I think, it's that, and actually that's screamed out in your testimonials as well. It's that ability to take that data and really interpret it. And as you say, look at it in a whole person perspective and be able to say, okay, here's the data, but in conjuncture with what I'm observing and what you're telling me, and sort of other sort of diagnostic sort of observations and tools. That's the real personal bit of bringing it together, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that in a way that's the art of it, and it's not really something that you can just learn by. It's something that you learn with experience, understanding, lots of reading, speaking to lots of people. You start to understand it very well.
Amazing, thank you. And so, Amanda, tell me, I mean, we have a lot of people listening who will be, long-standing complementary therapists, some clinical, working in hospital and sort of hospice settings, others working in the luxury spa, hotel, resort sort of sector, and others freelancing from everywhere from their own homes to local salons and clinics. And actually, as diverse as the US to sort of Asia, although a lot of our audience are sort of European based. What sort of advice would you give to the kind of non-medical professionals, but kind of, complementary therapists, to kind of help and support their clients within the realms of the context of their complementary therapy?
Okay, so the things that spring to mind when I think about those kinds of industries, which I don't work in, but I think about detoxification. So I think about impact on the liver of products and of VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and how the people that they're working with, yes, really important, and themselves, how, people working in nail salons, for example, or, in environments where perhaps the ventilation isn't what it should be, that there is an impact on the health of the client and the practitioner in those settings. It's really important to really have a good think about what kind of products are you being exposed to, what kind of toxins are in your environment. These are not that, people do end up with all sorts of serious illnesses as a result of not paying attention to how well they're able to clear these things out. For example, the master detoxifier, glutathione, is something that's non-toxic. It's not a very, it's one of the more expensive kinds of supplements. So you can supplement with glutathione, and I think that if somebody's in a fairly toxic environment, that would be worthwhile investigating, obviously with a health professional, a nutritionist ideally. But also then you might decide to take something like N-acetylcysteine, which is a precursor to glutathione. It's a bit more cost effective. And again, just a small amount of that might help to support patients or individuals if they are exposed to pollutants, I would say. That's important. And the other side also would be stress management as well. So often people are working lots of hours in those sorts of environments. It can be lots of customer facing, and to really think about how stress might impact health overall.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. That's really, really insightful. You mentioned sort of supplements there, and supplements get obviously, on the one hand, praised immensely for how they can support us, and then also rubbished because of the quality and the dysregulation
Yeah.
of them. And even in the UK market, that is considered relatively sort of high standard. What's your thoughts around that result in regards to where to access those supplements and who to get those supplements via and through? Because obviously that is a big one, isn't it? As most people are kind of getting them out of their supermarket sort of now, or their local sort of health store.
Yeah, a few things spring to mind. So first of all, it really, really matters. It matters where you buy your supplements. It matters what's on the label. All supplements are not created equal. Be very, very be mindful, I would say. I was going to say be very careful. I think it's true. You know, where you see fortification, for example, in junk foods, this is fortified with vitamins, it's fortified with B vitamins, it's fortified with minerals. But when we look at what kind of biochemical presentation they come in, they're not bioavailable, and some of them can cause harm. I've written about 3 different supplements that are which are B12, B9, and beta carotene on my Substack, which can be harmful to health. So just because it says it's a vitamin or mineral does not mean that it is actually going to be of benefit to you. There are some excellent supplements out there as well. I would expect people to notice a difference. So not always, but I would expect people to notice a difference. I recently was at London visiting a new clinic, and we were given some liposomal turmeric, some curcumin, and I kid you not, I'm now going to stock these, but the supplement that I took improved my eyesight. And I was walking through London that evening. We know when you're sort of opening and closing your eyes, just is it true? Has my eyesight just improved? And it did. And then it went back to the same, which was so interesting because there is an oxidative stress inflammation component as well to reduced eyesight, which has really, it's been so interesting. And I do notice a difference. So with the supplements that I take, I do take supplements. I don't take the same ones every day. Because I understand what I'm looking for, I tend to, take what I think I need at that time. And I think it's very important to remember that quality, unfortunately, you usually end up paying a little bit more for quality, and you do need to check. And that taking supplements long term as an insurance policy may also not be the best thing. The body likes variety. The body actually needs variety. And you can build up a kind of tolerance to, or you can actually end up in toxic situations by building up too much, especially fat soluble nutrients. So if you are taking supplements, it's best just to maybe even book in for a quick 30 minutes, 60 minutes with a local nutritionist, naturopath, just to do a quick overhaul of your supplements, make sure they're right for you, and maybe just have them checked every 6 months, even every 12 weeks would be ideal.
Yeah, amazing. And I think that's such an important message, isn't it? Because people often think, if they identify they need something, or the kind of PR of it is so good, they're kind of thinking, yeah, that's kind of the box I need to sort of tick. And then it is a sort of thing that most people then think they just need to stay on indefinitely, rather than actually, do I still need it? I remember my sister-in-law, there was some beautiful, I won't mention the name, beautiful presented sort of supplement in a glossy magazine, and she sent me a picture and went, do I need this? And I was like, okay, we can't tell you that just from the glossy magazines looking it through.
Right.
You need to see, are you deficient in it first?
Right.
And do you need it? And then do you still need it if you
Right.
start taking it in three months and whatnot? Is 12 weeks, from an optimum point of view, is 12 weeks what you would recommend, Amanda, for people sort of making those observations and working alongside someone? Or is it, can it be sort of stretched out? What's the ideal?
It depends. So so when I work with people with cancer, I test blood testing every month.
Yeah.
Ideally, we check regularly because it's an evolving landscape. So we need to keep on top of it. There's we don't have the luxury of a couple of months
Yeah.
of just leaving it often. With individuals who are not suffering with serious chronic diseases, I make recommendations for 12 weeks. And after that time, I say beyond that, that's no longer a recommendation of mine because we can achieve sufficiency in 3 months with certain things. And as I've mentioned, with some supplements like vitamin A, D, Ke, if we have too much of those, we can actually end up in a toxicity state. So I've spoken with many, many people who've heard some person online, maybe it's some bro science, whatever, and they've heard that they need to take high dose vitamin D,
Yeah.
and they'll take 20,000 a day, and then they'll come to me a year or two later. I've been taking 20,000 IU a day for 2, 3 years, and then I ask them to stop immediately, and we need to get a blood test because you can actually go into a toxicity state if you take too much of that as well. Not to say, it might be right for some people to take it at that level, but we need to test.
Yeah, yeah, it shouldn't just be something we grab off the shelf. Absolutely. And so tell me about some of the kind of core lifestyle or sort of foundation advice, without going into personal consultations and diagnostics, which we know is the absolute ideal. But for those listening, what's the kind of key advice you would give people to kind of look after their well-being generally in a way to minimize their risk of developing or accelerating sort of chronic disease?
Yeah, so in general, there are a few things. It's not just about what you're bringing in. We've talked a lot about bringing in supplements and things like that. It's also about taking out. So the things, looking at the triggers of many of the diseases of modern lifestyle, it tends to boil down to oxidative stress and inflammation. And a lot of these are triggered by insulin. So when we think about the kind of diets that people generally eat in the Western world, we'll start with diet, then these diets tend to be loaded with seed oils. Seed oils are high in omega-6. Omega-6s eventually are converted into something called arachidonic acid in the body, and arachidonic acid is a precursor to inflammatory cytokines like TNF-alpha, interferon gamma, C-reactive protein. All of these trigger inflammation, and inflammation is a driver of cancer. So and also diabetes, cardiovascular disease, all sorts of things. So in the very first instance, a general piece of advice would be to get those seed oils out of your diet. And also think about sugar. And when I say sugar, I don't mean just the granulated white stuff. Sugar is effectively glucose, let's say, any kind of sugar. And our diets are loaded with that as well. So when I talk about sugar or carbohydrates, I also mean wheat flour, I mean grains, all grains, which can obviously includes pasta. Also, there's rice, there's couscous, all those sorts of wheat-based foods, bread, obviously. And any of those sorts of foods where it's particularly high in sugar is going to have an impact on the body because there are lots of people with insulin resistance moving into type 2 diabetes. That's on the rise. Cancer is very significantly on the rise, and a lot of these are driven by those kinds of, in the beginning, the foundation of these is an unhealthy diet which is loaded with inflammatory foods and lots of sugar and lots of carbohydrates. So my advice would be to minimize the carbs and start thinking about, for everybody, minimize the carbs, start thinking about where you're getting your healthy fats from if you're taking those seed oils out. And those healthy fats are going to be from grass-fed butter, ideally, lots of olive oil. Think about the good outcomes for the Mediterranean diet. This is a universal thing. There are individual differences within that. Some people might have histamine problems. Some people might have, other kinds of chronic diseases where maybe some gut inflammation where they can't handle any fiber at all, and all sorts of different things. But as a general rule, And the lifestyle factors would be think about sleep, stress, and movement. So, sleep is where you do your repair. How can you make sure you get a really good night's sleep? Make your bedroom into a sanctuary of peace. Keep the temperature right, keep it dark, get nice cotton covers, make sure you go to bed, keep at the same time each night, keep that circadian rhythm well looked after. Don't have electronics in the bedroom. All of those sorts of general pieces of advice. In terms of movement, we don't need to be beasting it in the gym, but 30 minutes walking every day is within most people's reach. And just prioritizing those routines as self-care can bring a lot of good results.
Yeah, amazing. And it's often kind of like, one of my mentors said to me in my early 20s, kind of forward to basics. And sometimes
Yeah,
it feels like we're kind of quite keen to go off to the shiny new innovative and,
right.
especially now in sort of my world where you've got people thinking they either have to do the hands-on complementary stuff or the tech, and it's that they shouldn't sort of integrate and they have to pick a side. And you're like,
Yeah,
it is kind of just remembering those foundations, isn't it? And kind of
yeah,
looking after those first and sort of well.
exactly.
Amazing. And so, I mean, for me, it's so rooted in logic. And there's so much common sense, isn't there, around everything I know you sort of stand for. And I just wonder, like, what do you see as the opportunity of kind of the merge of kind of, that kind of integrative wisdom with conventional sort of medicine? Because I'm a massive advocate for modern science and very evidence-based as you are. But we work systemically, and actually my mum's been diagnosed with some ill health recently, and we've joked she's collected kind of acronyms over the last 10 years from various sort of conditions between kidney, heart, sort of brain. And each specialist, has been amazing, but they don't necessarily connect and talk and interact. And of course, the data, within the NHS often isn't shared and supported either. And so, what's the hope for you? Flying this flag and leading the gold standard with integrative metabolic oncology care specifically, of that kind of blend and sort of partnership between kind of this what you're practicing and preaching, as you say, to support the terrain, to support the individual, and the actual treatment of the cancer via
Yeah.
mainstream conventional medicine.
Yeah, there are many of us now who want to bring and in fact Dale, who we've mentioned, has I think it's a change.org.
Yes.
It is it? Yeah,
Jay
it is.
McClelland, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so he is pushing for um, integrative medicine to become a basic part of the first point of conventional medical care. So
Yeah.
in certain countries already individuals are given access to some integrative oncology, integrative metabolic oncology therapies, or interventions at that stage at the very beginning, and that's when it's associated with the best outcomes. So I work increasingly sharing information, especially right now this summer, about off-label drugs, in a very similar vein to Jane McClelland. And she really pioneered a lot of that. And so with the off-label drugs, obviously this is still within a kind of medical paradigm. It's we're looking at individual processes in the body. Some of them will stop chemotherapy from being pumped out of cells, which is ivermectin, for example, with the efflux pumps, and some of the off-label drugs will stop broken away parts of tumors from adhering to the inside of the endothelium. So they all have these different kinds of anti-cancer mechanisms, and understanding each individual's cancer, because it is an individual and evolving scenario, it changes too, means that we can actually bring together these technologies, these pharmaceuticals, and improve outcomes, running that alongside treatment in the conventional respect, and ketogenic diets. Most of the time that is appropriate, and other kinds of lifestyle interventions. We just saw that exercise was associated with a huge benefits for individuals with colon cancer, which is the fastest rising cancer in the under 35 category. So we have the hope is that all of these evidence-based complementary therapies will be brought together for the one goal, which is the benefit of that patient to improve those outcomes.
Yeah, amazing. Absolutely. And I'm delighted. And I know, the British Society of Integrative Oncology is kind of growing and growing with support, as well as a relatively newly founded sort of division in the UK. And that's brilliant to see as well, and flying the flag. So yeah, hopefully more and more people are realizing, because as I say, it just, you sometimes wonder, don't you, is it just because I come from that kind of complementary sort of background, you think this is so logical? This is not kind of woo-woo or pseudoscience.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
It's
really
not.
practical, pragmatic, evidence-based, insights and application of those
Exactly.
insights.
Exactly, it is. It's backed up by robust science, sound biochemistry. When you understand how things interact and work, then we can, target different pathways in cancer with different interventions. And also, lots of these complementary therapies, I do want to add, are shown to improve the efficacy of chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and immunotherapy. So they do complement one another.
Absolutely. And actually, just in my field of working with kind of acupuncture and sort of touch, you actually, it's often, as you said, it's never about treating the cancer. It was always just about supporting the individual, whether that was sort of, with side effects, physical side effects, pain and discomfort, stress, emotional sort of stability and support, and also just to offer them a sanctuary sometimes of a safe place to go where they're not being prodded, and it's about caring for them rather than treating the cancer.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. So if you could leave our listeners, Amanda, with kind of one sort of key shift in their thinking, I mean, I think you've done that sort of lots anyway, hopefully, but around sort of, your expertise in metabolic health, what would it be? What would be the kind of one key thing you hope has shifted, or that people go away thinking about?
Yeah, is that we're not really looking at a them and us scenario anymore. In order to get the best outcomes for everybody, we need to be working together. And I think that that's what many of us are trying to do. So if you do end up with a cancer diagnosis, for example, don't feel like you need to make a choice between anything. Throw everything you can at it. Engage all, make a team, build a team around you, and engage all the expertise that is available to you. And always remember that it's the empowerment, and you can turn things around at any stage. It's being shown that people can have huge impacts on their health by using a variety of different interventions.
Yeah, amazing. And as you say, that's such an empowering message too. And often, I mean, we all like to feel empowered, don't we, and have hope. But I think even more so when people are diagnosed with any form of chronic disease, that empowerment is incredibly important, to help them sort of take the next steps and sort of
Yeah.
forward. Lovely. Amanda, I mean, I could speak to you all day, and you are so full of wisdom, and I'm absolutely delighted you were able to sort of join us and sort of share more about who you are, what you do, and your why. But I have a couple of just quick fire closing questions, if that's okay. I know you already said that you kind of got into this. Your story began with a book that sort of changed your life on sort of raw fooding. Moving forward from that, tell me about a book that you think everyone should read. So as a complementary therapist, as people working in kind of the health and well-being sector, what is one book that you think actually should be on their bookshelf?
Okay, so I'm definitely going to say The Metabolic Approach to Cancer by Nature. Of course, I'm going to say that, but it is actually a fantastic book because Nature breaks it down into each of the components of the environment. So it's great. It's not only great for people who have cancer, although I think it's on the must-read list. It's actually great for everybody to read because understanding 1 in 2 of us are meant to get, are predicted to get cancer by 2030. I think everybody knows that now. It's been widely publicized. That means that, 1 in 2 of everybody listening to this is going to experience it. And it's no longer really that much of a lottery. The odds are pretty high. So reading a book like that can give you the tools in advance. What do you need to start thinking about in your environment in terms of cancer prevention. And it's not just about preventing cancer. When you clean up the terrain and the environment, you clean up your biology, you clean up your perspective as well, and you lay the kind of good foundations for health for in the long term. So I would recommend that book.
Amazing, fantastic. And we'll put a link to that sort of under this podcast so everyone can kind of click and sort of get that. Thank you. And your favorite self-care ritual right now, or the one sort of non-negotiable, the one thing you just, no matter how busy life gets, and we all know that, that ebb and flow sort of happens, but what's the one thing you do not compromise on?
Okay, so my life is very, there are lots of demands in my life, so things do tend to be a bit flexible, but I do have a routine on a morning, and it is very simply to have my good quality, mold-free organic coffee and to go for a walk. And it's just a walk, a 20-minute walk in the trees, around the fields. I just make sure that I go for my walk so that I've had some movement before I sit down at my desk. And I've also been out in the fresh countryside. I've breathed the fresh air. I've been out in nature. So even when there's lots of things going on and lots of work to do, I do make sure that I go for my little walk.
Amazing, fantastic. And the best advice you've ever been given?
Okay, so the best advice I've been given, gosh, that is a real difficult one.
Sorry, I put you on the spot.
Okay, I really don't know. The best advice I've been given, I think just to, I'm just thinking about my granddad now, saying, he used to sort of say, be true to yourself, always, stand by the things that you believe in. And his words were, be true to yourself. And that, even as a child, I remember him saying that. And I think that that is actually great advice, to always kind of remember where you're going for in your own way, and not be swayed by the directions of other people.
Yeah, beautiful, lovely. That wisdom, I love it when it comes from grandparents as well, and kind of passes down the generations. Amazing. Amanda, thank you so much for all of your time and your wisdom. It's an absolute joy to listen to you and to see the incredible work you're doing. And as I say, we'll put the link to the website underneath so people can learn more and reach out for any individual help that they may be looking for, but also just to read some of the testimonials and some of the incredible differences that you've been able to make in many, many people's lives. And I know this will also do that and hopefully inspire more people, particularly in the complementary therapy field, to kind of learn more and sort of develop their skill set in a kind of evidence-based way as well. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
What an extraordinary conversation with Amanda. I hope you're leaving with fresh insights into how modern diagnostics, personalised nutrition and holistic care can work together to transform both health outcomes and overall well-being. To connect more deeply with Amanda, you'll find all her links, including her website, Instagram, and Substack, in the show notes below. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Ancient Wisdom, Modern Science. If you found today's conversation meaningful, please share it with someone who might benefit. Until next time, be well.